Zanil Mensah lived in Accra, Ghana, a city that buzzed with energy from morning till night. At 29, she had built a stable life for herself and her 6-year-old son, Kabi. She worked full-time as an accountant at a busy firm, spending her weekdays balancing numbers and her weekends juggling family duties. Everyone in her family called her the responsible one. But to Zanil, that title had started to feel more like a punishment than praise. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Mensah, adored her older brother Kojo and his wife Abina. No matter what Kojo did, he was always the golden child. When he got a new car, they called him ambitious. When Zanil bought hers, they said she was showing off. Still, she never complained. She visited often, helped around the house, and made sure her parents were comfortable. Most weekends, her brother and his wife dropped off their 2 kids for her to watch. She loved her niece and nephew, but it stung that no one ever offered to help with Kabi. Her parents acted like her struggles didn't count because she was so strong. Whenever she hinted that she was tired, her mother would say, "Zanil, you're the dependable one. Your brother has a lot on his plate." So Zanil smiled, even when she wanted to cry. She cooked, cleaned, and helped everyone else, convincing herself that being the dutiful daughter was something to be proud of, even if it left her feeling invisible. Every weekend felt the same for Zanil. By Friday night, her phone would buzz with a message from her brother Kojo or his wife Abina. "We'll drop the kids off early tomorrow, just for the weekend." There was never a question mark at the end of that sentence. It was always a statement, an expectation. So every Saturday morning, before she could even enjoy a cup of tea, her doorbell would ring. Kojo's 2 kids, Nana and Amma, would tumble in with their little bags full of energy. Abina would smile and say, "We'll pick them up Sunday evening, thanks. You're a lifesaver." And before Zanil could respond, they'd be gone, off to relax, run errands, or go on another business trip. Zanil would look around her small apartment, toys scattered everywhere, laundry piled up, Kabi tugging at her sleeve, and take a deep breath. Her one day off had turned into another shift she never signed up for. She'd spend her Saturdays cooking for 3 children, washing dishes that never seemed to end, and trying to stop arguments over who got the bigger piece of chicken. By the time Sunday came, she was too tired to even rest. Sometimes she tried to say no. She'd call her mother and explain, "Mom, I've had a long week. I just want to rest with Kabi." But her mother would always respond with the same guilt-tripping tone. "Family doesn't charge family, Zanil. You should be grateful to help. Your brother works hard, and Abina is trying to support him. You're the one who has time." Zanil would bite her tongue. She wanted to say, "I work hard too. I'm raising a child alone. Don't I deserve rest?" But what was the point? Every time she stood up for herself, she was made to feel ungrateful, even selfish. So she swallowed her frustration and agreed, just to keep the peace. Her neighbors had even started to notice. They'd see her chasing 3 kids around the courtyard and ask, "Zanil, are you running a daycare now?" She'd laugh it off, pretending it didn't bother her. But deep down it did. She loved her niece and nephew, but the constant demands were draining every bit of energy she had. On Sunday nights, after Kojo and Abina finally picked up their kids, she'd collapse on the couch. Kabi would curl up next to her, half asleep, his little hand resting on hers. In those quiet moments, she felt a mix of love and resentment. Love for her family, because she truly cared, and resentment, because that love was being taken advantage of. She knew this couldn't go on forever. But every time she thought of setting a boundary, the same voice echoed in her mind, her mother's voice, sharp and guilt-filled. Family helps family. And just like that, the cycle continued, weekend after weekend, demand after demand, until love started to feel a lot like exhaustion. It was a rainy Friday evening in Accra. Zanil sat at her desk, finishing a report long after most of her co-workers had gone home. Her eyes were heavy, and her shoulders ached from the week's stress. Just as she was about to shut down her laptop, her phone buzzed. It was her mother. She sighed before answering. "Hi, Ma." Her mother's voice came sharp and certain as always. "Zanil, your brother and his wife are going to Cape Coast this weekend. Be ready to watch the kids." Zanil closed her eyes. She didn't even get a chance to respond before her mother continued. "They'll drop them off early tomorrow morning. Make sure they eat well. Amma has a bit of a cough." "Ma," Zanil interrupted gently. "I can't this weekend. I'm working overtime tomorrow. We have a deadline." There was a pause, then her mother's voice hardened. "What do you mean you can't? You always help. Kojo and Abina need a break." "Ma, I need a break too," Zanil said quietly. "I'm exhausted. I just can't do it this time." Suddenly, another voice cut through the phone, her father. He was on speakerphone. "Zanil," he said, his tone cold and disappointed. "You're selfish. You never do enough for this family. Everything you have, we helped you get. And now you can't even take care of your brother's children for a weekend." The words stung. Zanil sat frozen, her heart pounding. She'd spent years bending over backward for her family, babysitting, cooking, helping with bills, and yet somehow it was never enough. Daddy, that's not fair, she said softly. I've been helping every weekend for months. Don't argue, her mother snapped. We raised you better than this. Family comes first. The guilt hit her like a wave, just as it always did. But this time, something inside her shifted. She looked around her small office. The papers scattered across her desk, the photo of Cobby smiling from a school event she almost missed because she was babysitting someone else's kids. A tightness formed in her chest. She realized she was tired of being scolded like a child. Tired of giving and giving while everyone else took without thanks. Tired of being treated like her life and her time didn't matter. Her parents were still talking, lecturing, guilt-tripping her through the phone. But Zanil wasn't really listening anymore. She felt a strange calm wash over her. All right, she said quietly. I understand. And then she hung up. She sat there for a long time, staring at her phone. Her hands were trembling, but not from fear, from something new, something powerful. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel guilty. She felt done. Something inside her had finally snapped, and deep down, she knew there was no going back. After hanging up the phone, Zanil just sat there, staring at her computer screen. The office was quiet, the rain tapping softly against the windows. Her heart was still racing from the argument, but instead of tears, a strange calm settled over her. For once, she wasn't trying to explain herself. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She just sat still and breathed. Then a thought crossed her mind. How much time had she really given away to her family? Not just emotionally, but literally given away. She opened a new spreadsheet on her computer, almost out of habit. If there was one thing she knew how to do well, it was calculate numbers. She started typing. Every Saturday and Sunday for almost a year, she'd watched Kojo and Abina's 2 kids. That was about 8 hours each weekend day, sometimes more. She added it up, 52 weekends, about 416 hours. Then she added the time she spent cooking for them, maybe 2 hours each visit, plus the trips to pick them up or drop them off when Kojo and Abina were too busy. When she saw the total, she blinked in disbelief. If she charged what a normal babysitter in Accra would, even on the lower end, it came to over 45,000 Ghanaian cedis. 45,000 cedis of unpaid work. Work she did while juggling her own full-time job, raising her son alone, and trying to stay sane. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. That number looked unreal, but it was real. She had been working for free, out of guilt, out of love, out of obligation, and no one had even said thank you. They acted like it was her duty. As the realization sank in, something inside her twisted. For the first time, she didn't feel guilty. She didn't feel ungrateful. She felt angry. Angry that her parents could lecture her about family while ignoring her sacrifices. Angry that Kojo and Abina treated her like a built-in nanny. Angry that she had let it happen for so long. She scrolled through her old messages. All the "Hey sis, can you watch the kids this weekend?" And "Thanks Zanil, we owe you one." Messages that never turned into actual help or repayment. It all looked so different now. She wasn't being kind. She was being used. Zanil leaned back in her chair, letting the anger burn quietly inside her. It wasn't the kind of anger that made her want to shout. It was the kind that made her want to change things. She looked at the spreadsheet again, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. For the first time in years, the numbers made sense, not just on paper, but in her life. She had been treating her time like it was free. But now she knew better. Her time had value, and she was done giving it away for nothing. Zanil stared at the spreadsheet on her screen for a long time. The numbers were clear now. 45,000 Ghanaian cedis worth of unpaid work. She had done the math, and the truth stared back at her. For years, she had been giving her time, energy, and weekends away for free. And not once had anyone stopped to think about what it cost her. Slowly, she opened a blank document and clicked on her company's official invoice template. The same one she used every week for clients at work. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed the heading. Childcare services rendered, 52 weekends, for 116 hours total. She filled in the details carefully, like she would for any professional client. Date range, January to December. Service, babysitting and meal preparation. Rate, standard hourly rate for domestic care. She itemized every task, babysitting, cooking, cleaning, school pickups, grocery runs, everything her brother and his wife had dumped on her. She didn't exaggerate a thing. The numbers spoke for themselves. When she finished, she signed it at the bottom with her full name, Zanil Mensah, accountant, and sat back in her chair. It felt strange, almost rebellious, to see her family's favors written down like a business transaction. But that's exactly what they were. She saved the document as invoice_family_childcare_services.pdf. Then she opened the family WhatsApp group. Her parents, Kojo, Abina, everyone was there, chatting about random things. She attached the file, took a deep breath, and typed her message. Dear family, Please find attached an invoice for unpaid childcare services rendered over the past year. Total balance due, 45,000 Ghanaian cedis. I'm tired of being treated like free labor. Kindly settle this outstanding balance at your earliest convenience. Zanil. She read the message twice, her thumb hovering over the send button. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about the money. It was about respect, about finally standing up for herself after years of being walked over. She hit send. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The message ticked once, then twice. Read. 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 She imagined the shock spreading through the family group, her father fuming, her mother clutching her chest, Abina's jaw dropping. Before anyone could reply, she pressed and held her power button until her phone's screen went black. The silence that followed was perfect. For the first time in years, Zanil didn't care what anyone thought. She didn't need to explain herself or apologize for setting a boundary. She closed her laptop, packed her things, and walked out of the office into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, and the city lights glowed softly across the wet streets. As she drove home, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. She smiled to herself and whispered, "No more." By the next morning, Zanil's phone was buzzing nonstop. Even before she got out of bed, the vibration wouldn't stop. The family WhatsApp group had exploded. Dozens of messages poured in, one after another, the kind that make your stomach twist just from seeing the previews on your lock screen. Her father's message came first. "You've lost your mind, Zanil. Who sends an invoice to their own family? What kind of daughter does this?" His words were sharp, full of disappointment and anger. A few seconds later, Abina jumped in. "Wow, you're really jealous, aren't you? Because we have a better life. This is just bitterness." Then came Kojo. His message was cold and short. "If this is how you want to be, fine. Don't expect me to talk to you again. You're cut off." Zanil read each message quietly. Her heart beat fast, but her face stayed calm. She didn't type a single word. She could already imagine her father pacing in the living room, shouting at her mother, while her mother wrung her hands and cried about how ungrateful their daughter had become. Not long after, her phone started ringing. "Mummy" flashed on the screen again and again. Zanil hesitated but didn't answer. Then the messages started coming in, voice notes filled with crying, anger, and guilt-tripping. Her mother's voice cracked through the speaker in one of them. "How could you embarrass us like this, Zanil? What will people say if they find out? You've brought shame on this family." Zanil turned her phone face down on the table. She sat there in silence, her stomach tight but her mind strangely clear. The old Zanil would have rushed to apologize. She would have cried, tried to explain, begged them to understand. But not this time. Instead, she made herself breakfast. She helped Kabi get ready for school, humming softly as he laughed about his cartoon backpack. She went about her day like nothing happened, because for once, she wasn't going to explain herself to people who didn't even try to understand her. By afternoon, her phone had over 100 unread messages. Her father had sent a long, angry paragraph about how she'd forgotten her roots. Abina added snide comments, calling her dramatic. Even Kojo sent a voice note saying she was disrespectful and selfish. Still, she didn't respond. Not a word. She left every message on read. That silence, her silence, spoke louder than anything she could have said. It drove them crazy, but it gave her peace. Later that night, when she finally looked at her phone again, she saw the chat still buzzing. But instead of feeling hurt, she smiled to herself. She knew what this was, the sound of a family finally realizing that the person they used to control wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in her life, Zanil didn't feel small. She felt powerful. The days after the invoice incident felt strangely quiet. Zanil woke up to silence. No calls from her mother, no messages from Kojo asking for favors, not even a good morning text in the family group. It was like she had been erased. For a while, that silence stung. She'd grown up being the one everyone relied on, and now it felt like she'd been cut off completely. But as the week went on, that silence started to feel peaceful, almost like freedom. Her parents didn't call, not once. Her mother, who used to check in every evening, suddenly had nothing to say. Her father, the one who always had opinions about her life, went quiet too. It was their way of punishing her, giving her the cold shoulder until she came crawling back. But Zanil didn't. Instead, she poured herself into her work. She stayed late at the office, took on new projects, and actually had time to focus on her own goals for once. Meanwhile, Kojo and Abina had to find someone else to babysit. At first, they complained to everyone who would listen. "Zanil has changed," Abina told their mother. "She thinks she's too important to help family." But when they started calling around for childcare, reality hit them hard. The first babysitter they found charged 250 Ghanaian cedis per day, and that didn't include meals or transportation. The second one asked for even more. By the third quote, Abina was furious. "Do people really charge this much? she asked Kojo. He just sighed. By the end of the month, they realized that Zanil's free help had saved them thousands. Suddenly, the invoice didn't look so crazy anymore. Still, their pride kept them from admitting it. They just grumbled about how, these days, everything is about money. While her family stewed in silence, Zanil was busy building something new. One Saturday morning, while drinking coffee and scrolling through her phone, she had an idea. What if she turned her unpaid labor into an actual business? She already had experience, she loved kids, and she knew exactly what parents struggled with, especially working parents like her. She opened a notebook and started planning. A few weeks later, she printed flyers. Bright Start Care, reliable weekend babysitting for busy professionals. She offered structured activities, healthy meals, and flexible hours. She started with just a few clients, mostly other mothers from her office, but word spread quickly. Soon, her weekends were fully booked. Parents loved her professionalism, and they trusted her completely. For the first time, Zanil was being paid, really paid, for the same work she used to do for free. At night, she'd tuck Kabi into bed and smile, feeling proud and calm. Her family might still be angry, but she had finally chosen herself. The silence that used to hurt now felt peaceful. And deep down, she knew something they didn't. Sometimes, losing your family's approval is the first step toward gaining your own freedom. Within a few months, Bright Start Care became the talk of the town. What started as Zanil watching a few kids on weekends quickly turned into something much bigger. Working mothers all over Accra were talking about her. There's this lady who runs the most reliable weekend babysitting service. One woman told another at work. She's patient, professional, and the kids actually love her. Word spread faster than she expected. Before long, Zanil's phone was buzzing with new bookings every week. She created a small website, printed more flyers, and even hired 2 other single mothers to help her on busy weekends. Parents appreciated how organized she was. She provided healthy meals, had educational games, and sent photo updates during the day so parents could see their kids were happy and safe. It wasn't just babysitting anymore. It was a service that made people's lives easier. Zanil worked hard, but this time it felt different. She was no longer being used. She was being respected. Every sadie she earned came from her own effort, her own vision. Within 6 months, she realized something incredible. She was making more money from Bright Start Care than from her full-time accounting job. The same work her family had dismissed as just helping out had become her most successful project yet. With her savings growing, she decided to take a bold step. She moved out of her cramped apartment into a new, modern one in East Legon, a quiet neighborhood with trees, space, and a small playground for Kabi. When they unpacked the last box, Kabi ran around the living room shouting, "Mommy, this is our new house." Zanil laughed until she cried. It wasn't just a new home. It was a symbol of everything she'd built by standing up for herself. For the first time in years, she had real time for Kabi. No more weekends spent taking care of everyone else's kids for free. They cooked together, watched movies, and even planned something she'd dreamed about for years, their first vacation. She booked 2 tickets to Cape Coast. When she told Kabi, his eyes lit up. "We're going to the beach?" he asked, jumping up and down. "Yes," she said, smiling. "Just you and me." On that trip, walking along the sand with the ocean breeze in her hair, Zanil finally felt light. She wasn't carrying guilt, exhaustion, or resentment anymore. Just peace. She realized that everything she had lost, her family's approval, their fake praise, didn't matter compared to what she had gained: self-respect, freedom, and happiness. That night, as Kabi fell asleep beside her in their beachside room, she whispered a quiet thank you, not to her family, but to herself, for finally choosing her own life. For the first time ever, Zanil felt completely free. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday morning. Zanil was at her office, reviewing invoices and planning weekend schedules for Bright Start Care, when her receptionist knocked gently on the door. "There's someone here to see you," she said softly. "He says he's your father." Zanil froze for a moment. She hadn't seen her father in months, not since the family drama exploded. Slowly, she stood up and walked out to the reception area. There he was, sitting quietly in one of the chairs. He looked smaller than she remembered, his shoulders slouched, his once black hair now mostly gray. The proud, commanding man she had grown up fearing looked tired. "Daddy," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Zanil," he said, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "Can we talk?" She led him into her office and closed the door. For a while, neither of them spoke. He looked around the room. The framed certificates, the business logo on the wall, the photo of Zanil and Kabi smiling on the beach. "You've done well for yourself," he said finally. "Very well." Zanil nodded, unsure what to say. He sighed deeply. "Your mother and we were wrong. We treated you unfairly. You were always the one holding this family together. I see that now." Zanil felt something shift inside her. Part of her had waited years to hear those words. Another part of her didn't need them anymore. "Thank you," she said quietly. Her father looked down at his hands. "We thought we were teaching you to be strong, but really, we were taking advantage of you. Your brother," he paused, shaking his head. "Kojo didn't realize how much you did. None of us did." Zanil listened, her heart calm. There was no anger left, just a quiet understanding. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said softly. "But things can't go back to how they were." He nodded slowly. "I know. I just hope one day we can be a family again." Zanil smiled gently. "We can," she said, "but it has to be a healthy kind of family, one where everyone respects each other." Her father looked up, meeting her eyes again. She continued, her tone steady and calm. "Respect is not something you demand, Daddy. It's something you earn. I'm not the little girl who said yes to everything anymore. I know my worth now." For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "More than you know." When he left, Zanil sat back at her desk, staring out the window. Her chest felt lighter than it had in years. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about letting people off the hook. It was about freeing yourself. And that day, she truly felt free. A year later, Zanil's life looked completely different. What started as a small weekend babysitting service had turned into a thriving business with branches in 3 cities across Ghana. Bright Start Care was now known for its professionalism and warmth. Parents trusted it completely. Zanil had hired full-time staff, from caregivers to coordinators, and every one of them respected her not just as a boss, but as a woman who had built something powerful from scratch. She especially made it a point to hire single mothers. She trained them, paid them fairly, and mentored them on how to manage their money. "You don't need to wait for anyone to save you," she often told them. "You can build your own freedom." Watching them grow reminded her of her own journey, from exhaustion and guilt to strength and independence. Her family eventually came around too. Kojo and Abina still used her services sometimes, but this time they paid, in full and on time. There were no guilt trips, no family discount talk, just quiet respect. Her parents also softened. They no longer interfered in her life, and when they visited, they spoke proudly of her success. "Our daughter runs her own company," her father would tell people, and for once, Zanil knew he meant it. One evening, as she stood in her new office overlooking the city lights, she thought about how far she had come. The same woman who was once called selfish for setting boundaries was now being praised for her strength. She smiled and whispered to herself, almost like a reminder and a victory. "They once called me selfish for valuing my time. Now they finally understand. My time built an empire."